Hello and welcome to Agents of Nonprofit. My name is Alexander Lapa, and I'm here to speak with everyday superheroes helping nonprofits. Joining me today is the nonprofit nerd, also known as Jarrett Ransom. Jarrett, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you so much, Alex, for, you could see me, but I know our listeners can't. Every time I get called nonprofit nerd, I so proudly push up my glasses on the bridge of my nose.
Maybe you could start actually the conversation by telling people why do you call yourself the nonprofit nerd?
Yeah, that is a great question. I started my business. This is actually my 16th year. My company name is the Raven Group, and that's spelled Rayvan. But I really found myself, Alex, in conversation saying, I can nerd out over this stuff until you become blue in the face because I never will. And what I realized, was like over time, I kept saying that. And I'm like, that's what I am. I am the nonprofit nerd. I proudly own this title. I even copyrighted it. And so really, from this place of eat, breathe, sleep, day in and day out, to be of service to my community in the nonprofit sector. So I also affectionately use that term for my fellow peers. So you might get blessed with that name during this conversation.
I might have actually, because I was on your podcast last year, I believe, or the year before.
That's right.
I think you might have bestowed upon that title a piece, which I was very graciously able to accept.
Yeah. Well, I love that because, being called a nerd is a little quirky for some people, but I do mean it with the best intentions.
Absolutely. So before we get too far into the nerdy stuff of things today, I was wondering if you could share your superhero origin story.
Yeah, this is a great story. And I talk about bestow, right? Like I really have to give credit to my family, in particular, my mom. But growing up, we were very, like pretty basic family. We didn't come from lots of money. We weren't affluent, but we certainly had time. We had time and we had big hearts. So my mom had us very engaged with our community at a young age and anywhere, Alex, from picking up trash to making cookies to, serving food at soup kitchens, that kind of thing. And so it really did, weave this fiber of community into who I am and who I've become as an adult and as a professional. Fast forward, being in sports, I knocked on doors trying to sell gift wrapping, cookies, you name it, right? Like door to door fundraising. And then fast forward even further, I did the breast cancer 3-day walk with my mom. We were each, charged to raise a certain amount of money. At that time, it was $2,100. She said she would walk with me, Alex, but she was not going to raise the money. She was not comfortable raising the money. And I was like, no problem, Mom, I can do that. And I realized during that time, I loved asking for money. And that is not common. I've grown to find out. And so I really did find my niche with my origin story, of being part of community, coupling that with my love for asking for money, that fundraising piece, and really have just dedicated my career to the nonprofit sector. My undergrad is in mass communication and theater. And then I did go on to get a master's in business administration. So I really have niched my areas of expertise or zones of genius, as I call it, in that fundraising space as well as strategy. And I do believe, being from a small town, rural South Carolina, rolling up our sleeves, being a part of the fabric of community, giving of our time, set the stage and really just pave the path for how I wanted to show up in my life and to be a part of a bigger puzzle.
Love it. Absolutely love it. It's not often actually I have guests that started at a very young age in the realm of nonprofits. People tend to more accidentally fall into it. So I'm very happy to hear a story that started from a very young age. Awesome.
Thank you. And I also would love to elevate that further because I do believe we could all be philanthropists. That's a really big name. In Scrabble, you would probably win the game, like mic drop right there. But to me, philanthropy comes in all ways, shapes, and sizes, right? Like So if you have time, give of your time. If you have financial means, give of your financial means. If you like, there's so many ways that we can be a part of the greater good, and get your kids involved early, because that really does model this sense of philanthropy and this sense of community at a very early age.
I mean, there's study after study that keeps on saying how people are constantly happier when they are giving something to someone else as opposed to receiving from something else. I mean, asking for money, of course, is a different part. It allows you to ask for more, do more. But the idea of giving is much more powerful than receiving. And it's a bit counterintuitive, and people who haven't done it before might be a bit resistant to it. But the moment you start doing it, it becomes addictive. You realize that is actually very inspiring and very motivating to keep on going and keep on doing it and to keep on giving to others.
There's endorphins, right? There's endorphins
Mm-hmm.
behind it. People give for all different reasons. It could be a tax credit. It could be truly altruistic. I also will out myself. Like in our community, I will say the nonprofit sector, we really do perpetuate the scarcity mindset. I do not want to believe in it. There are times it creeps into my day-to-day life, and I feel as an entrepreneur like this is kind of a slow quarter or maybe a slower year. But when I personally, Alex, am feeling that scarcity creep into my own personal life, I choose to change the paradigm. I believe wholly in prosperity, abundance, and looking at it from a lens to say, where can I give? And again, it could be time, it could be in-kind product, it could be monetary, of any size. So what I do when I feel that creep into my day-to-day life, I go online. I typically find a school that is, low income here in my community. And I look at their wish list and I just send them something anonymously, right? It could be a science kit. It could be markers. It could be glue. It could be anything. It could be a globe. But that is something that has helped me. Just as you said, statistically, research shows it makes you feel better when you give, even more so than when you receive. So that's just a little tip I like to share is I do that, and it doesn't have to be huge. I mean, it could be a small token, but that token and the act of doing that, I have felt it shift the way my thinking takes shape.
I also love the fact that you mentioned it can be anonymous, because it's also shown that the giving part, you don't it's just the act of giving that's important. It not even the recognition or the reward or the thank you. It's just you giving to someone else, whether they know it or not, is what causes that endorphins and the well-being, the sense of well-being to appear in you. So yeah, that's awesome. So we can talk about, I know, a lot of things in this conversation. So we decided, you and I beforehand, to talk a bit about wellness, and I do have scarcity mindset on my list as well. So maybe that's a good part or a good place to start, just to make sure. I always like starting high level and then working way down to a more granular level. Let's make sure people are clear on what do you mean by a scarcity mindset versus an abundance mindset.
Yeah, great question. And you're right. We could probably talk for hours, but don't worry, listeners, we won't. So really in the nonprofit sector, and I could nerd out over this also for hours, but we are tasked to zero balance our budget. So every year we're creating a brand new budget. Every year we're depleting that budget. We're starting over the next year again with a zero balance budget. Now, it doesn't mean we cannot make a profit. It does not mean that we can't put that profit towards our people, towards our programs. That, in fact, is what I coach my clients. However, we tend to see in the nonprofit sector that we are coming from a place of scarcity, which means a lack of, right? We do not have the resources we need, and that could be time, that could be people, that could also be money, of course. And the abundance mindset is simply the opposite. So it is operating from a mindset, and I mentioned earlier, prosperity consciousness. So really coming from a place that we are prosperous. My mind, my conscious, my body, my energy believes there is an abundance in this world. And I do coach that with the clients that I work with, that let's debunk this whole scarcity, lack of mentality for our nonprofits. I even go so far, Alex, just to tell my clients, we're not looking necessarily for the nonprofit rate, because I do believe those of us that have offered, and maybe still do, I do not, offer a nonprofit rate, a nonprofit discount, is perpetuating this scarcity mindset. So a little disruptive, thought there, but that's a little bit of the definition: scarcity versus abundance. And again, going even further into that prosperity consciousness.
That's an interesting point because I've seen the same thing in my world too, in the Salesforce consulting world, where a consultant will work with for-profit companies and nonprofit companies and have two different rates. And
Right?
you're saying that the nonprofit shouldn't ask for that rate?
Well, if it's there, yes. But what I say is, why are we treating the nonprofit businesses different? Because we are businesses. So instead, I want us to coach, teach, train nonprofit businesses to advocate for the resources they need, which needs to come from their supporter base, right? And be willing to invest in their mission, their people, their vision, just as you would any other business. So what I have moved from is more of a sliding scale. And this has been over time, right? I mentioned 16 years. So, and I also work exclusively with nonprofits. Now, mind you, Alex, if there is a business, let's say a print shop, that says, oh yeah, we can offer you the nonprofit rate, absolutely take it. I'm not saying don't take those opportunities when they exist, but I am saying to start thinking differently from that prosperity abundance mindset, that it is your obligation to run your nonprofit just as you would, a for-profit entity and business, from that mindset of there is an abundance out there and we are going to build systems and processes and efficiencies to support this.
Okay. And thank you for that clarification.
Yeah.
And I actually agree with it because mindset, I think, is a very important first step in framing the vision of what is possible. Like if you have, to your point earlier, a scarcity mindset, then you're constantly thinking and fighting for the little scraps that you receive versus saying, look, there is enough out there. We know it's out there. It's just a matter of getting it. And I believe it's possible. I believe it exists. Maybe even more than I believe. I know it exists. I'm going to grab it. And that will start the whole shift in, like you said, perception and mindset to say, no, we got this. We might have to adjust certain other tactics and strategies to be able to capture everything. But to your point, you should as a nonprofit, because besides the only real difference between a nonprofit and a for-profit company is a tax designation, but running it should be done very, very similarly. So that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do, to dovetail this into wellness, I believe this falls into wellness in all ways, shapes, and sizes. Back to that mindset. Are we coming in with a wellness mindset? Are we coming in with an abundance mindset? And I do believe that continues to breed wellness and wellness culture, which I know we're going to dive into with a lot of different questions. But I do think that those are often tied to one another.
Let's jump into wellness then, because that was the initial topic that we had planned at least, but we'll see how far we get with that because I love it. I think it's an important one. It's not talked about enough. Let's talk about what do we mean by wellness? Is it wellness we're talking about wellness within the nonprofit and let's start with a broad definition. What does wellness mean to you in the scope of a nonprofit?
Yeah, and I don't think there's any one particular definition. Of course, we can look up in, dictionaries and see that. For me, when I talk and take the stage on wellness, Alex, it really is about creating a culture of wellness within our organization. I do believe that as nonprofit leaders, first and foremost, we're looking to build a community built on wellness. Well, who makes up the nonprofit business? People. Our people also need to show up well. We need to create this wellness culture for our people, individuals, to serve the community from that lens of wellness. We need to have, this culture where everyone feels safe to say how they're feeling, what they need. Of course, we can go back to March of 2020. I know this really put a spotlight on wellness. And I speak from it personally with my own podcast as well around navigating wellness. So how are we balancing everything in our life, which again was just spotlighted for the last, I'm going to say 4 years since 2020. And as we're recording this, who knows what date it is when people are listening, but we're coming up on the end of 2024. So it's been a long time. So how are we taking care of our community? But how are we taking care of our staff that's taking care of our community? And for me, wellness can be defined in a lot of different ways, but I do really believe it comes from a holistic standpoint, that it is mind, body, and spirit, and it is professional and it is personal. It is family of any way that person defines it, and creating this wellness culture where people can show up as their best self and advocate to become and stay their best self.
So let's start with then, how would a nonprofit who understands the benefits of it, but not quite sure how to start a wellness culture? Like, is it usually a top-down driven approach? Is it the people who say, like, we're missing something, I'm lacking a bit of wellness, or some other trigger that they're feeling or condition that they're feeling that they know something is off, and they talk about it to their ED? Like, how does it generally come about to start moving towards a culture of wellness?
Yeah, I do believe, again, proud disruptor here, again, as I push my glasses up on the nose of my bridge, but I believe it needs to be infiltrated from all sides, top down, bottom up, side to side, board members. And what we did learn during the pandemic is people are people. They have needs, whether their children are home, whether they're taking care of their parents, advocating for this flexibility. And so providing times where our staff can go to the doctor, right? Like an annual checkup, providing times for staff to work flexible shifts. Now, I realize not every position has the same amount of flexibility, but one of the simplest things that I truly believe will start to shape this for your organization, if you're thinking, I don't even know where to start with a question in your meetings, right? And it's a check-in question. How are you doing? How are you feeling? I have seen the meetings I've been a part of, and I have not led these conversations, but being part of them, where I do see the facilitator of that meeting start out by asking, the first 5 minutes are a wellness check-in. That to me is step one, provide a wellness check-in. I also do believe, as I said, infiltrate from all sides, top down, bottom up, side to side, board members, is the more people that are willing to open up and share from a place of vulnerability and transparency will continue to shape this culture for your organization and for your people. So the board members to ask, how is our staff doing, right? Our supervisors to ask, how are our program managers doing? It doesn't always have to be the CEO or the executive director. I really think this could be across the board. And I'm in so many different executive director conversations and forums, Alex. I believe the executive director, CEO needs to receive that question, because often they are managing, leading silently at the top. And I guarantee you, if you walk in and say, how are you doing? How's everything, with you, your family? How are you feeling? They probably haven't been asked that question. So I think it needs to come from all sides. And we need to model it at all levels.
I imagine, so the great questions. How are you feeling? How are you doing? 5-minute wellness check-in. I love it. I also agree all directions. So everybody needs to be to a certain level involved, interested, and want to pursue this. What would be some of the advantages then of wellness? I mean, is it just having a good work-life balance? Is it like, what are the benefits of, basically, I know that some of these answers already, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
Of course.
Because there is, some people have the need to feel like they're always on, they're always optimizing their time, they're always efficient with their time. And, the wellness part, or the soft part, or the squishy parts might be left out and forgotten. But I agree with your earlier comment about, if we're taking care of the community, who's taking care of the people taking care of the community? I like that structure of seeing it. So let's just talk about then, or if you could share a couple of ways that how really important it is, why it's so important, and some of the benefits of it.
The biggest benefit I've seen from this, Alex, is teamwork. It
Mm.
pulls the team together to know what exactly is on everyone's plate. Because if we show up at a meeting and we're only showing you what's on our work plate and you have no idea what's going on with our family plate, our at home plate, our parents' plate, I am fortunate enough, and I say that with a little bit of sarcasm. I am in this sandwich generation. I'm raising a teenager. That comes with its own challenges. And I'm also starting to parent my parents. And that comes with separate challenges, right? My parents are actually 3,000 miles away. So when we look at a family unit right now, we're not necessarily, in fact, I would venture to guess the majority of us are not living with our parents, or maybe not even close proximity. I just mentioned mine are still in South Carolina as I sit here in Arizona. So how am I parenting my parents and being the most involved parent I can right now for my teenager, plus my own personal needs? I speak openly about depression. I was diagnosed with depression many, many years ago. And so that has been a journey for me to navigate. I'm also one of those people, Alex, I am typically high energy. What can I do for you? And I have given myself grace to say, not every day is going to be like that. And the more I feel safe to share with my peers, today's just not a good day. The way my peers show up for me, and my peers are really, they're clients, but they're different kind of like teams, right? We're still peers, but we often do project work together. There's grace, and I understand you. Let's reschedule for tomorrow, or you've got a teacher meeting with your son. Great. We can move this 30 minutes earlier to flex the schedule to make it work. So just realizing that your team comes to your meeting with a full plate and you're likely only seeing one piece of what's on it. If you don't create this wellness culture, if you're not creating this place, this space where it's safe for people to share what is going on in their life. And I think that's the biggest benefit, going back to your question, is teamwork, empathy.
The advantage I find, because I used to work with for-profit companies back in the day, and now it's mostly nonprofits, in that nonprofits tend to attract people who are more empathetic, they're less ego-driven. And so sharing your thoughts, sharing your feelings, sharing how is your workday tends to be more availably ready than if you're in a for-profit company, which is all business, no pleasure. I think it's important to recognize that we're here in part, not of course for a paycheck. We're not really here for a paycheck. Of course we have to make money and live and support ourselves, but that's probably not the primary motivator. The probably primary motivator is most likely impact, helping the community, and so forth. It comes from a place of goodness, but it also has to be. But the kind of person that it attracts also tends to be a bit more empathetic and understanding. So there shouldn't, in my opinion, be a fear to share things, to share your vulnerability, to share how things are going, because that could make you, to your point, stronger and more connected to your team. And we all need that in our life. We all have times where we do have moments where I need a bit of I'm going through this right now, actually, where I'm getting a lot of support from my family and friends. And I'm so grateful to it. It's making us much, much closer together as a family and as a network. And I know that I will be ever indebted to them, so that if ever they have a situation where I can help them, I will be happy to reciprocate. It won't even be a thought. So the ability of sharing, opening, teamwork, I mean, I've seen it firsthand, and I can definitely underline and highlight and all the positive attributes you can put toward the idea of improving your teamwork.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. And I'm thrilled to hear that you're feeling that support. Imagine feeling that support from a team standpoint as well for
Mm.
our listeners, right? Like imagine having that same level of empathy. And I'd love to touch on that because you mentioned the majority of the makeup of our teams are more empathetic.
Mm.
I was talking to another peer of mine about, I don't know if you're familiar with ACEs, but it's adverse childhood experiences. It basically talks about from a young age how how much trauma did you experience in your developmental years? And talking to a peer of mine, she was at a dinner, and 9 out of the 10 of the people at this dinner, all nonprofit professionals, had high trauma as a youth. And I am looking into that from the standpoint of that is fascinating. I again would go out on and place a bet that the majority of our staff probably has that same feeling, right? Like there was something in our childhood, something that draws us to being the helper, right? Like we want to help, we want to serve, we want to make things better. And what is that need inside of us? Now, I'm not a therapist. I'm not a social worker, licensed social worker, right? But I've been in the trenches of this work for a long time, 20 plus years. Even myself, my license plate reads "Be of service." Clearly, there is a need I want to fulfill and to help provide. So I do think that the majority, back to your point, of the staff working with us are doing this for that altruistic reason, right? Like they want to help. Clearly, we're not doing this for the zeros at the end of our paycheck. That is known in our community. But there's other payments that come with these, with this privilege of being in this work.
Any drawbacks? I want to play devil's advocate for a second. Like, is there any reason why organizations shouldn't prioritize wellness? And I know it's an odd question, but I just want to make sure that this is a known positive, and maybe there's some negatives or some drawbacks. I'm curious to know if there are any actually, or have you seen any?
So I have not personally seen it. I will, and I don't feel that my lived experiences give me the right to talk about this to an extent, but people of color, marginalized communities, they might not feel safe, right? They might not feel safe to share this. And so again, I see it's my obligation as a middle-aged Caucasian woman to create the spaces that build safety for all people, which is why I said earlier, I do believe that this needs to be modeled at all levels, right? All genders, all ages, all socioeconomic, all races, everything, to help build this culture of safety. Now, some people, and I will say generationally speaking, that is a really big word. If we were playing Scrabble, we're doing good.
2 words so far.
Philanthropy and yes, that one. Not everyone feels comfortable sharing from a personal space. I even was raised, you leave work at work and you leave home at home. Well, I clearly did not follow that well into my adult years. But I do know that that is still the motto for so many of, even older than me generations. So maybe devil's advocate to continue this, train of thought is, what if I have too much going on at home and it jeopardizes my job security? What if, I say I'm having these challenges with childcare, or my child needs more medical attention, which now places me in an uncertain, situation with my boss. They now question if I can do my job. I get that. I understand that. Hopefully that's not happening, but I would say, back to playing devil's advocate, that's probably still in people's minds, and rightfully so.
That's exactly where my thought was going as well, too. Oversharing and also taking advantage of the situation, of amplifying your situation to be able to take more breaks or to take more advantage of the situation. I don't think that's very common. I can't imagine it would be, but I think your point, it's the oversharing part, because there are some parts where if you're sharing more than you should, could, supposedly, or need to, and your manager, your boss starts questioning whether you're capable of doing what you're doing or to do, that can definitely be an issue.
It could, yeah.
Is there any particular line that you see that can be drawn to say, maybe it's not a good idea to share this, but everything else is okay? Or is it more just common sense and everybody should figure that out on their own?
Well, I would love to say it's common sense, but I think we all had to have different senses, right? I really think it depends on the culture of your setting, right? And the culture between the person you're sharing. You might be able to share something differently with a coworker as opposed to a supervisor, as opposed to a board member. So there might be different levels of sharing. But I do think that there are ways in which we can share and to say, I have a personal matter I need to take care of. For instance, I was on a team. I had a team member that needed to go to their 12-step meetings. This was, so many times during the week, during their lunch hour, and it extended their lunch hour beyond the hour. So how could we flex their schedule so they could still get the needs that they needed met for their personal, requirements? Attend their 12-step meeting, come in early, stay a little later. Again, just really making sure that the project and the task are done. So I also think that there's ways to say, hey, I have a personal matter. Maybe you don't tell your boss that you're going to a 12-step meeting, but you just say, I need to extend my lunch, by 30 minutes twice a week. And here's the solutions in which I would like to provide to you. I'm happy to come in early on these days, stay later on these days. Happy to, take another shift, whatever that looks like. I do think there's ways to have these conversations while still maintaining a level of confidentiality.
So aside from sharing, talking about feelings and so forth, what other ways can a nonprofit promote wellness? Like there's one example that jumped into my head. It was when I was working with a very large nonprofit recently. During their once a week meeting, they would have shout-outs where they would open the floor to allow someone to give a compliment to someone else in the group. And that was it grew. It became really popular trend actually. And I think that's one way of doing it. And I also, as part of the same meeting, there was a person that was designated as someone to share a bit more about their personal life. They actually did like a presentation, 15 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever it takes, to talk about a bit about their life, how they started, where they grew up. And that also gave us an opportunity and everyone in the team to learn about each other gradually, which was also amazing, and ask questions and all that kind of stuff. So those two I can see, for example, as really good ways to increase teamwork, to build a sense of wellness. Would you have any comment on that? Or do you have any other recommendations for building wellness as apart from those three?
Yeah, I like those. I also know many of us are working on distributed work teams. And so if you're using a platform, maybe like Slack or Teams, you could just have a channel on wellness. You could have a channel on shout outs, right? Like there's so many ways you can incorporate this, I think, with little to no cost. I think also, when you have team meetings, maybe they're monthly, quarterly, whatever that looks like, you could do mindfulness exercises, which literally could be 2 minutes, right? Like I do one, it's roller coaster breathing. And all you need is your hand, and you trace your fingers and you do a slow intentional breathing. That really helps to set the stage. You could, I know some teams that they do yoga, and it's optional. Not everyone has to do it. So I think there's a lot of ways you can do this. Even going to volunteer with other organizations, again, what we're looking for is to get to know your teammates, build community, build empathy, really just, create this bond where you're working and supporting one another. I think there's ways in which we can do this, a lot of ways. When I serve, one of my service lines is interim executive director. I've also been interim chief development officer. But coming in, like providing support to the team. Food trucks are pretty, popular. And so we've had food trucks come in where we have done quarterly lunches for the entire staff. We've done some mindfulness exercises. We might even have a massage therapist come in with their chair, right? Like there's a lot of ways you can do this. And I just think that's a great opportunity because you are providing some support to your team. I forget the amount of time, but when you look at your year, we're spending a lot of time at work. A lot of our time is spent at work. So I do believe we need to take care of our employees. The other thing is, and this, I've worked at a lot of organizations, Alex, where sadly the staff could actually be the clients, right? They're not being paid enough. They are within the poverty line, our threshold. So it literally is, where can you support your staff from that financial standpoint so that they can seek out the additional support that they need? There could be, opportunities for that. There could be opportunities to say, hey, as an organization that serves this community, we understand that your mental health, your overall wellness is very important. Maybe we create a walking group, and during lunch, we're all going to take a walk together. Maybe it is we have, employee services that you can seek out a counselor, and a counselor isn't always mental health. It could be a financial counselor, right? There's a lot of ways to support your team. So yeah, just kind of go down and start to see what works for you. And the last thing I will say is also when I come in as interim, I do a very quick Google survey where I ask every staff member to tell me a little bit about themselves. It's prompted by questions. I allow them to attach a photo that makes them smile. Often that's where I find if they have children, if they have animals, if they enjoy hiking or camping, like that is their place to really share from their own personal standpoint and back to those teams and Slack channels. It's a great place to highlight that, right? You're getting to know your peers.
I really like that. Share a photo that makes you smile. I've never quite read it or heard it phrased that way, but I definitely like it.
Yeah, because we're not saying like share a photo of you and your family, like
Right.
open-ended. What makes you smile?
There's one thing we haven't spoken about yet, and that's expressing gratitude. And I was wondering if you could share about that, because to me, I follow a few people who that is like their mantra. It's all about expressing gratitude every day, even if it's for a few minutes, which will give you the sense of wellness as well. So how would you recommend incorporating gratitude into this conversation?
I'm going to say similarly to that wellness check-in at every meeting, I think there also needs to be a gratitude moment. And that could be kind of what you just said earlier, where there's a shout out at a team meeting. That's a great opportunity to weave in gratitude. The online channels, Slack, Teams, I know there's others. That's a great place. You can have a gratitude channel. I also coach my clients to create a gratitude email folder. So when they receive a compliment, it could be from a client, it could be from a board member, it could be from, a coworker, anything that again makes them smile, makes them feel good about what they did. Save that in your gratitude folder. Some of my clients call it their kudos folder, but that is a great opportunity when work seems really heavy, days seem really dark, and your deadlines just keep piling up. Go visit your gratitude folder. Go visit that kudos folder. Take a little bit of time to replenish yourself, recharge with these compliments you've received over the year, because it is so, so, so very easy to focus on what's not working, what's not getting done, what can we do better. But I do think focusing on gratitude, how far have we come? What have we done as a team? Where have I been praised? Where have I received this shout out? I think that really will shift your mindset and move you back. That's a little bit of the scarcity, right? Like we're intentionally moving out of this place of depletion, moving into a place of gratitude. So kind of how we started our conversation, we're bookending it in a very similar manner, that we can shift our mindset when looking and thinking about gratitude and giving gratitude. It's not just receiving, it's giving.
I would say it's more about giving than receiving.
Yes.
There's one sentence I love to share with people, and that is the one that says, "If you love what you do, you don't work a day in your life." And that applies to me in a lot of ways. But you mentioned also just now a few minutes ago about dark places when you're lacking motivation, or you don't see the forest from the trees or the trees from the forest. I never know which way to go. But anyway, the
I think it depends on where you're standing. Is that right?
Yeah, maybe. No. I'm sure there's a proper way to say it, but it's all good. You know what I'm talking about. But the idea is, like, if I'm going to play devil's advocate one more time, if giving is gives you that sense of endorphins and pleasure, if you do what you love, like, shouldn't those feelings be able to sustain you during those dark times? Like, why is wellness needed if if the basic feelings should be taken care of by the sense of giving and loving what you do. I'm not sure if I'm quite phrasing that sentence properly, but I think I know what I'm talking about.
That is a deep question. I
Mm,
think that I have the answer, but where my head and my heart goes is we are people. And there's a lot going on in our world. There's a lot going on, in the globe. There's a lot going on in our personal life. And it could be traffic coming in the morning, right? It could be a recent, medical diagnosis within your family. It could be that client you were working so very hard on to overcome substance use, right, has fallen back into old behaviors. So we, as an empathetic sector, I do believe, and I can only speak for myself, but I take on so much pride in the work that I get to do with my clients. And as a small business owner, Alex, I am so very lucky. I say to get to play in many sandboxes, right? Support many missions. And you hear these wonderful success stories, and you sadly hear some stories that didn't make their way to success at that time. So I do feel there's so many different factors that come into our day-to-day life, 24 hours a day, that could just kind of be that tripwire that sets us off in that moment. It could be a moment, it could be a day, it could be a week, really depending. But that's where my head goes.
I would underline that as well. And I mean, the fact is we are human. We have things that impact us. And despite all best efforts and intentions, there are things that impact us that we do need support from. We are not meant to be alone. We are social creatures. We are meant to support each other in a community, 150 people like the old school tribes back then. You're not meant to do it all in yourself, even though you do have some principal foundations to be able to give and want to give. It's not going to be enough. So that's how I would phrase it as well.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, and it happens so fast, right? Like, and if
Hmm.
you think of a team, maybe your staff is 10, maybe your staff is 40, maybe your staff is larger. Every person has something going on personally, right? And it might not be them. It could be someone close to them, it could be a neighbor, but something that will impact them. And yeah, underline the fact we're human.
Let's look forward for a second. If you had a crystal ball and could predict just, I don't know, the evolution of wellness, which I'm not even sure is like, do you see any trends that have happened in the past? I know that we talked about a spotlight because of COVID that have definitely shifted priorities and hopefully more toward wellness. Like, where do you see trends continuing to go? And is there any impact to AI in this? Because I know AI is becoming more prevalent. And I'm just curious, as a technologist, if AI has any part to play in this, or this is a fully human thing and AI is not quite there yet. So, yeah, thoughts on that?
So I am not an AI specialist, but I do love to dabble in the technology. It is my second best assistant, right? So I think overall, if I had a crystal ball looking forward at wellness, I do hope that it continues to evolve for the better. I do hope that our every individual will show up from a holistic standpoint to model wellness from their side, and that we can permeate this culture globally. I also think that AI from that standpoint can help us. For me, and then maybe this is just a very technical answer, it has certainly shortcutted a lot of my work, right? It has built in efficiencies that would have taken a tech stack and investment that I don't have at this time as a small business owner, nor is it an investment that I want to make as a small business owner because I would place value elsewhere. So, from that standpoint, it has helped me immensely, whether it's writing annual reports, executive summaries, shortening a grant proposal, right? Like there's so many ways in which it has provided me a piece of wellness, whether it's peace of mind, whether it's giving me an hour back on my day So I do think that it's complement to the overall structure and ethos, and I'm fascinated to see where it goes.
Oh yeah, we're just beginning.
Yeah.
Actually, I've had quite a few conversations recently about AI, and like I know it's not empathetic yet, but I'm sure it will be, or at least simulate it really well soon. But to your point, even now, it can be used to help you with tasks to make you more efficient. And I guess that is a sense of wellness as well, because you don't have to stress about it. You can handle it yourself. Well, give it to your intern, your AI intern, so to speak, and that allows you to carry on so that you have peace of mind that it's taken care of. So I can see the usefulness of it as not just as a pure tool, but a sense of I got this done. I'm able to do more. It gives you maybe a sense of confidence that I got this. I can achieve more than I could in the past because I have this AI working with me. So that makes sense.
Yeah, and there was a study. Sorry, I can't cite it, but maybe we can look it up on bedside manners with medical professions. And if, like, faced with asking the human doctor a certain question and how that was responded and delivered, the message was delivered versus an AI peer, right? The AI had better bedside manners than the human professional. And
Really?
that to me, talk about wellness, talk about empathy, right? Like, if that's where we're going, then AI could absolutely be a wellness tool where we could ask a question. We could ask what resources are available to me. How do I handle this conversation with my team or teammate? And if that study, right, if we can find it, if that study continues to support that response, I think we're going somewhere with AI and wellness.
I'll have my team investigate to see if we can find it. And if we do, we'll put it into the show notes. So thanks for that.
Yeah, it was all about bedside manners.
Jared, this has been awesome. I'm really thankful for you being here and sharing all of this great stuff. I was hoping you could share with people how can they get in touch with you in case they're interested in your services or talk more about this or just get in touch with you any for any particular reason.
Absolutely. And thank you for the opportunity. First and foremost, you can find me on LinkedIn. It's my number one platform, Jarrett Ransom. I'm probably the only female Jarrett Ransom you'll find on there. I also have Instagram, nonprofit_nerd. That underscore is very important. And then, of course, I've got a couple of websites, but you will find those from LinkedIn. And that's just probably the best place. So thank you, Alex. Appreciate the opportunity.
Jared, thank you so much for joining me today. And thank you so much for doing what you do.
You too.
All right, that's it for today. I'm Alexander Lapa, and I hope you join me again in the next Agents of Nonprofit.